Hey everyone, I am so incredibly thrilled to have you here for this explainer. If you've ever stared up at ancient ruins or towering historical monuments and just wished they could talk to you, well, you are absolutely in the right place. Today, we are going to dive into the incredibly rich, culturally layered source material of Anatolian architectural history. Think of me as your personal decoder ring. We're going to learn exactly how to read these ancient stones and structures like a vivid, open history book. By the time we wrap up, we won't just be looking at old buildings, we're going to see epic stories of empires, literally mind-bending engineering miracles, and deep human faith. So let's decode this together. Okay, let's dive right into this itinerary. 1. Anadolu'nun Gizli Mimari Dili. 2. Istanbul, İmparatorluğun Anıtsal Kalbi. 3. Kayalara Oyulun Mucizevi İnanç. 4. Kadim Dornun Taş Ustadalar. And finally, 5. Christianalin İddilik İzleri. Basically, the game plan is to first learn the architectural vocabulary of these ancient builders, and then we're going to take a massive chronological and geographical road trip across Turkey. Section 1. Anadolu'nun Gizli Mimari Dili, Anatolia's secret architectural language. Understanding these magnificent buildings starts right here with learning the secret visual language of the architects. So let's start with a massive engineering problem. How on earth do you put a giant, heavy, round dome on top of a square room without the whole thing just collapsing? Well, the answer is the pendentif, or pendentive. This specific architectural hack is the absolute secret engineering ingredient for some of the biggest monuments we're going to see later on our journey. By using these triangular transition pieces, ancient architects figured out how to safely distribute the crushing weight of a massive dome down into 4 solid square pillars. I mean, it was a real game changer that completely altered the skyline of history. Now, what's really interesting is how the physical layout of worship evolved over time. Take the basilica plan, for example. This was adapted straight out of ancient Roman civic halls. Think long rectangular spaces divided by columns, all drawing your eye up to a single focal point. But as theology became more complex, so did the architecture. Eventually, we get the Kapali Yunan Haçi plan, or the closed Greek cross plan. This was entirely unique to the Byzantine era. It features this perfectly balanced cross shape radiating out from a central dome. The building itself literally became a physical, structural representation of faith. And the walls of these structures, you gotta realize they weren't just decorative. For a population that was largely illiterate back then, these walls were the ultimate visual storytelling devices. They were heavily structured around something called the Dodecaorton, the 12 great feasts of Eastern Christian art. As you walk through these ancient spaces, the frescoes and mosaics act just like a giant storyboard. They visually lead you through the absolute most crucial moments of the biblical narrative, starting from the Annunciation and birth all the way through to the crucifixion and resurrection. Knowing exactly where to look is honestly half the magic of visiting these sites. If you stand right in the center of one of these historic spaces and look straight up into the highest central dome, you are almost always going to meet the gaze of Pantokrator Isa, which translates to the Almighty. But if you lower your eyes just a bit to the half-dome resting over the eastern apse, you'll find the Theotokos, the Mother of God, who is usually depicted holding the child. It's this incredibly strict, beautifully thought-out visual hierarchy that translates perfectly into stone and mosaic. Section 2. Istanbul, İmparatorluğun Anıtsal Kalbi. Istanbul, the monumental heart of the empire. Let's move along and see how this newly learned vocabulary comes to life on a massive, imperial scale. All right, we are looking at 2 absolute titans of architectural history here, built just years apart in the 6th century. First, you have Hagia Sophia, known globally as Hagia Sophia, commissioned by Emperor Justinian. It is just bursting with lavish gold mosaics, like the famous Dia Sisfine. But then, right next door, you have Hagia Irene. What's so fascinating is how these 2 buildings impartially represent completely different theological eras. You see, Hagia Irene survived the iconoclasm period, which was a time when religious images were strictly banned. So instead of opulent portraits, its apse features a really stark, simple black and gold cross. It trades visual opulence for absolute, unmatched acoustic perfection. 2 neighboring masterpieces, 2 totally different historical realities. 55, that is 55 meters. That is the soaring height of Hagia Sophia's central dome. It was designed by 2 genius mathematicians, Anthemios and Isidoros, way back in 537 AD. And guess what holds up that monumental dome? Those exact pendentifs we defined earlier.
Just imagine standing beneath a 55-meter golden canopy that has literally survived earthquakes and empires for nearly a millennium and a half. It's an experience that completely redefines your understanding of what humans are capable of building.
But hey, imperial grandeur isn't just about sheer size, right? It's also about exquisite detail. Outside the old city walls lies the Chora, or Chorea Kilisi, which was masterminded in the 14th century by a statesman named Theodoros Methokrites. The mosaics and frescoes here, especially the Anastasis, the descent into Hellesine, are just jaw-dropping. The depth, the raw emotion, the naturalism, it is essentially Renaissance-level art happening right here in the late Byzantine period. Fast forward a few centuries, and Istanbul's architectural story just keeps innovating. Take Sfeti Stefan, for instance. The ground near the Golden Horn was actually too weak for a heavy stone building. So what did they do? They prefabricated an entire church out of cast iron in Vienna, floated the pieces all the way down the river on ships, and assembled the whole shebang like a giant metal puzzle. And then you have St. Antoine right on the bustling Istiklal Avenue, bringing this incredibly striking red brick neo-Gothic revival architecture straight to the heart of the city in 1912.
Section 3. Kayalara oyulan mucizevi inanç. Miraculous faith carved in rock. Now let's shift our focus away from the imperial capital and head into the rugged Anatolian landscapes, where faith literally carved its way right into the earth. Welcome to Cappadocia. The contrast here is just beautiful. Consider the Karanlık Kilise, or the Dark Church. It gets its name because almost no natural light enters it. And because of that total darkness, it acted as a miraculous time capsule. The vibrant pigments of its Last Supper frescoes are perfectly preserved. Now contrast that with the Tokali Kilise. As the region's oldest and largest rock-cut sanctuary, its vaulted ceilings are absolutely bathed in this vivid, breathtaking lapis lazuli blue, detailing a chronological timeline of miracles carved directly into the K-walls.
Moving north to the incredibly steep cliffs of the Black Sea region, we find the jaw-dropping Sumala Monastery. Founded in the 4th century by two Athenian monks, Barnabas and Sophronios, this isn't just a tiny room in a cave. It's an entire complex hanging off the side of a mountain. It steps intricately from the main cave church, which is entirely covered in centuries of layered frescoes, through student rooms, a library, and all the way down to a sacred spring or yasma. Just try to imagine the sheer willpower required to carve a thriving community out of a vertical rock face.
Section 4. Kadim Doğun Taş Ustaları. Master stonemasons of the ancient East. So, the crucial point here is watching what happens as we head to the eastern frontiers to witness some unparalleled mastery over stone.
Out on an island in Lake Van sits the Akdamar Kilisese, built in the 10th century by King Gajik. He used a really complex four-leaf clover plan for the layout, but the true marvel is the exterior. The outer stone walls act as a spectacular, high-relief comic book. You can walk around the building and read the stonework to see biblical stories. Jonah escaping the fish, David battling Goliath, Adam and Eve, and even King Gajik himself proudly holding a miniature carved model of the very church you are looking at. Further south in Mardin, the cultural layering is incredibly deep. Monasteries like Deir el-Zafaran and Mor Gabriel are ancient strongholds of the Syriac Orthodox faith. What is truly awe-inspiring here is that these masterful early Christian stone structures, featuring stunning golden mosaic ceilings commissioned by Emperor Anastasius, are actually resting directly on top of ancient Mesopotamian sun temples. The history is quite literally stacked, layer upon layer, keeping traditions alive that are thousands of years old. And then we reach Ani, the ruined city on the far eastern border. The Ani Cathedrale here was completed in the year 1001 by a master architect named Trot. Now, why is Trot important? Well, he's the very same architect who was called to Istanbul to repair the collapsed dome of Hagia Sophia. But here in Ani, he was experimenting with pointed arches and clustered vertical columns way before those features ever reached Europe. He was essentially laying the direct groundwork for Western Gothic architecture, right there in the ancient East.
Section 5. Hristiyanlığın ilk izleri.
The first footsteps of Christianity. Let's transition to our final segment and trace the very earliest footsteps of this history across the map. Take a look at this massive historical timeline. We have early centers like the Hagia Elenia in Konya, founded in 327 AD by Emperor Constantine's mother, Helena. We have the 5th century Alahan Monastery mountain complex in Mersin, near Tarsus where St. Paul was born. We even have the 4th century church in Demre, dedicated to St. Nicholas. And yes, that is the historical figure who would eventually transition into the global legend of Santa Claus.
Anatolia is quite literally the crucible where these early traditions took shape.
And speaking of beginnings, let's talk about the word Christianos. This specific term was used for the absolute first time in history to describe the early congregation gathering in secret. And where were they gathering? At the St. Pierre Cave Church, carved straight into the side of the mountain in Antakya. This site carries immense historical weight. It comes complete with ancient mosaic floor fragments and hidden escape tunnels carved directly into the rock for the congregation's protection.
And this brilliantly illustrates the turning points of history. 431 AD. In that year, a massive council was held at the Ephes Chieftakee Lycée in ancient Ephesus. It was here, within these very walls built over an old Roman commercial basilica, that Mary was officially granted the doctrinal title we learned about earlier, Theotokos, or Mother of God. The decisions made in these specific architectural spaces fundamentally shaped the theology of the modern world.
Which brings us to our final thought. What do these silent stones and colorful mosaics whisper to us today? From the secret engineering of the Penteef, to the lapis lazuli caves of Cappadocia, to iron churches floated down rivers, I really hope this explainer has shown you that when you learn the language of architecture, you aren't just looking at old rocks. You are unlocking a deep, diverse, and brilliant human story that is still echoing today. Keep looking up, keep asking questions, and I'll see you next time.